Hello and welcome to another episode of Full Court Finance here at Zacks. I'm your host, Ben Rains. In this week, we have a really fun episode for you guys. I interviewed Michael Breit, who is the managing partner of regions at EisnerAmper. It's a leading audit, tax, and advisory firm. But why we had him on this sports business podcast is he is also not only the partner in charge of their New York offices, but he is in charge of the firm's sports and entertainment group. And we talked about franchise valuations, the growth of the NBA, TV revenues, the future of sports on television, the NFL's ratings, soccer's growth, specifically Major League Soccer's growth, new and upcoming sports, how retail investors can get involved in sports, and an array of other topics. And the conversation was really fun. Michael has a wide range of knowledge on all of these topics. He has been involved with pro sports for, I think he said 30 years. It was a lot of fun to talk to him. The conversation was really interesting, really engaging, and his background, I mean, they work with NBA teams, Major League Baseball teams. So he has a lot to bring to the table. It was a really fun interview, and I can't wait for you guys to check out our interview with Michael Breit. So, Michael, my first question is, what does the sports and entertainment division at EisnerAmper do? What do you guys do?
So we provide accounting, tax, and advisory services to mainly sports leagues and teams throughout the country. EisnerAmper is a 1,500-person accounting firm, 18th largest in the country. In the sports and entertainment division, we have 75 people representing and working on various accounts such as the NBA, the NHL, Major League Soccer, the New York Jets, the New York Islanders, and many others.
So you work with all these big leagues and teams. In what capacity are you working with them? What exactly are you doing for, say, the Islanders or an NBA team or something like that?
So we audit basically the financial statements of the team. We could audit the financial statements of their joint venture interests. We audit the financial statements of their pension plans. We also do their tax work, all their tax returns for all of their company filings. And we also do a lot of advisory work. For the NBA, we're involved in a revenue sharing audit, which is an audit, and it's a lot of advisory work connected with the NBA revenue sharing audit, where we go to every single team in the league and we basically audit under a framework established by the NBA that they call their combined financial statements with respect to who shares in the amounts that are redistributed to the teams, who are the payors and who are the recipients, and the NBA bases that determination based on the audit we do. So again, we mainly work for the leagues in an audit, tax, and advisory capacity.
Okay, and how long have you guys been working with a league, say, like the NBA?
So we've been working with the leagues for over 10 years now. We launched our sports and entertainment division in 2004, so we've been doing it over 10 years. I personally have been involved on the NBA account for over 30 years. I previously worked at a Big Four firm. I was a partner in a Big Four firm, and now we have a bunch of partners that also came from this Big Four firm to come to EisnerAmper, and we've established probably the largest sports accounting, tax, and advisory practice outside of the Big Four in the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. So jumping in from, you guys do a lot of work with the NBA. The NBA is a growing global sport. These teams are going up in value. Walk me through how it goes from, in 2010, you have the Golden State Warriors selling for $450 million, which at the time was, I think, the biggest deal ever in the NBA. So Joe Lacob, Peter Guber buy the Warriors, and then 7 years later, you have Steve Ballmer buying the Clippers for $2 billion. How did that valuation go up in such a relatively short amount of time?
What a great investment, right? Well, I guess what happened was, the world changed, and that Steve Ballmer, in fact, helped change the landscape of, team economics and really as it relates to acquisition economics. Because when you look at the top four major sports in the country, there's a scarcity value there. You only have around 125, call it franchises in the country, and there are more high net worth individuals looking to reap the benefits of owning a sports team, whether it be for family purposes or whether it be for tax purposes, because it's still one of the great tax shelters that you have in regard to deducting the franchise value over 15 years. So when you look what Steve Ballmer did, he said, well, when will I ever be able to purchase a Los Angeles franchise. I'm a big lover of basketball. This might not come again in my lifetime. I want to make sure I don't get shut out. I could afford it, and I'm going to spend $2 billion on this franchise because I want it. And that was a big, big part of it. And then all of a sudden you've seen, subsequent to that, you've seen other teams go for a lot of money as well. I mean, not only in basketball, but in football as well. You know, the valuations have gone up in baseball as well. The Dodgers, whoever thought the Dodgers would have sold for over $2 billion. But Steve Ballmer really changed, the economics as it relates to franchise acquisition, because the cash flow multiples and your discounted present values, when you look at those rights, well, that is not much of a factor anymore, because the scarcity value has become so apparent in the world of sports that people want to be in the club, they want to be part of the ownership, they want to be at the table speaking about the development of the leagues, and that's why they've appreciated so much. In the NBA is probably the best global league probably in the world. Adam Silver has done simply an amazing, amazing job with respect to globalizing the NBA, making it, in his words, digital, social, and mobile, and a lot of people want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's starting to slowly climb up there with soccer as a global sport. And then, so could you walk us through, say, the Dallas Cowboys? They're valued at, I don't know, $4 billion or so, or Real Madrid, who's upwards of $3.5 billion. What exactly is going into that valuation? Like, who is making this number that the Dallas Cowboys are worth $4 billion? How do they get to that point?
It's a bunch of factors. Obviously, part of it is in regard to their revenue generation. With respect to who values them, I know Forbes does a estimate each year on all of the major sports and now soccer with respect to franchise valuation. And not only revenues, but eyeballs, growth, social media. There are a lot of factors that go into valuations now, and there are a lot more than your regular 8 to 10 times earnings that you might see on public company valuations. They're almost approaching, in a lot of times, these tech valuations, simply because the growth of sports and the growth of, for instance, soccer, football, basketball has been enormous. Roger Goodell is saying that they're going to be, a $50 billion league in 10 years. And, just a few years ago, they were a $7 billion league, and now they're almost a $15 billion league. So the enormous growth in the revenues and the projections of the future growth go into those valuations as well, and that's why they have significantly appreciated over the last years. Their new media streams, we now have Amazon streaming games in the NFL. I'm sure that's going to happen in the other major sports. So it's not just the media rights for your national TV contract, your local contract, but how about all the digital media contract and the streaming contracts? Those are only going to grow in value, and that content, they're going to be different mediums that they're going to be connected to or broadcasted to in future years that also are going to have value. So the people who perform these valuations take that into effect as well, and that's why we've seen this incredible appreciation.
Yeah, it really has gone up so quickly. So you were talking about TV contracts. So the NBA signs a 9-year, $24 billion deal, and the NFL's deals are up in the early 2020s. Do you see those deals continuing to rise? I mean, because the NBA's deal went up drastically from their last contract. Or do you see streaming helping draw those numbers up, or are the NFL's ratings and sort of the decline of linear TV going to eventually bring those numbers back down from these crazy $24 billion contracts?
Well, there are a lot of naysayers out there, and a lot of people are saying that the digital media rights, or it's just, as you said, the TV contracts might come on the decrease, but there's no signs or any indication that they are. Now, some would say, hey, well, wait a minute, the NFL TV ratings are dropping, but in a few years ago, you didn't have Verizon and you didn't have Amazon paying the NFL a boatload of money for these streaming rights, so that's just an extra revenue source that the NFL has now that's adding to, obviously, their coffers. So I think they're going to continue to rise. There's nothing in there that's saying they're not. More people are watching NFL games. They may not be watching them on a TV. They may be watching them on another device or on broadband. But people still want to watch that. And you mentioned about linear TV. I think I would tell you that it will continue to be linear. I mean, when you look at any type of live sports, it's the best unscripted reality TV there is. So there's always going to be that much emphasis on watching it live. It won't be on tape delay. It won't be, stuff that's broadcast a day or two later, because it just doesn't have, the same emphasis, because once it's live, then it's over. So I think, in my view, sports will always be linear because it's the best source of live entertainment there is. So because of all of those factors, I think that digital rights will continue to rise. I'm not sure if they're going to rise at the same proportion they have in the past few years, but nothing is saying right now that it's going to decrease.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, live sports is the only thing you need to watch live these days, so that is going to be the lifeblood of TV basically going forward for as long as I can imagine. And so jumping off of that, a sport that is growing here, and it's been growing here in America for the last 40 years or so, and that is soccer. Major League Soccer specifically, they have 12 cities now competing for a couple new franchises, and the entry fee is $150 million when only like 10 years ago there was only 12 teams in the MLS. How do you see the MLS growing in America, and do you think that like $150 million franchise fee, entry fee, is that worth it? And sort of just talk about where you think the MLS is in terms of growth in America.
I think Don Garber has done just a remarkable job of growing the league. He's done it very deliberately in regard to expansion. He's gone into those cities and to those markets that fully embrace soccer, and he's done it the right way, because when you look at Portland and Seattle and Toronto and those teams that are doing exceptionally well, they built these stadiums, amphitheater style, hold 25,000 people, which is the right amount for a soccer-style specific stadium, and the fans embrace it. They sell out. They have incredible record crowds. And because of that, and because of the attention that's brought on not only to the team but the community and how they're marketing that team in that market in that city, those people are embracing it. Obviously with the changing demographics in this country, a lot more people are gravitating to soccer. It wasn't just the soccer mom who used to take their children to play soccer when they were younger. Now it seems that the younger generation, and clearly the millennials, are getting into soccer, and they're getting into it in a big way. You had obviously a New York team granted a franchise a few years ago that paid north of $100 million to get into the New York market, which also was an incredible boon for Major League Soccer, because New York City FC is doing incredibly well, has a great team, a lot of attention, and a lot of fanatics in regard to the New York City Football Club. So Major League Soccer, again, I believe they just chose their 4 finalist cities in regard to expansion. They're all cities that really embrace the sport, that have a soccer-specific stadium. So I think they're poised for incredible growth because of what not only the MLS has done, what has changed in the demographic in this country, that people really see soccer as the number one global sport in the world, and what they've done to the quality, not only the quality of the game, the quality of the players, and the quality of play has increased. 10 years ago, when you look at Major League Soccer, they were not one of the premier leagues in the world. You had the English Premier League, you had the Champions League, you have various other leagues. Now, because of the heightened quality of play, MLS is probably one of the top 3 soccer leagues in the world, and that has helped them also immeasurably.
Yeah, so I tend to agree that soccer has grown so much in the States. And so jumping off of what you said about New York City FC, so NYCFC, they're currently playing in Yankee Stadium. Do you see that being a long-term option for that club? As I know that their fan base is growing, that specific team in New York, even though the Red Bulls were there before. Or do you see all of the MLS teams having to have these soccer-specific stadiums?
Well, there were a lot of naysayers about NYCFC, how many people they draw in Yankee Stadium, and they're averaging over 25,000 people for each game, which I think has been terrific. There's a lot of fan reaction, and a lot of people are really excited about NYCFC. I think, going to Yankee Stadium to see a game, the sight lines are great to watch a soccer game. I do think if they have the opportunity to ever get into an area that they maybe previously wanted, like a Flushing Meadows area, to do do something like that. I think they'll continue to explore that. Right now, I think they're very happy at Yankee Stadium and playing there. I think they developed a great fan base from the Bronx, from Upper Manhattan, from Lower Westchester, easy to get to. So they're attracting a lot of people to the sport. But, they're still going to look at potentially a soccer-specific amphitheater-type stadium if the right, obviously, tract of land comes along and if they have the rights as it relates to all concessions and parking, because that's the way you really make money in, if you own the arena and if you own, obviously, the team, that's really where that compounding, helps the owners to make a lot of money. So I still think they'll continue to look down that road. But right now they're satisfied playing where they are.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And jumping off of that, again, so the TV money is starting to grow a little bit in Major League Soccer. You have ESPN and Fox and Univision paying, I think, like $90 billion a year for these rights.
90 million. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, 90 million. Yeah, sorry, 90 billion would be insane. Thank you. So do you see, is that where the growth has to come? Does it have to come from television for Major League Soccer, or can the growth just come from more teams and more people showing up to the games? Or I guess how does that work in terms of a league growing? Does it have to grow on television for it to really grow at all?
Well, I think the media rights has to grow. We've seen that in the NFL and the NBA, where we've seen this incredible appreciation, not only in franchise values, but in regard to the revenues of the leagues and media rights. Now, the media rights could be national television contracts. They could be local television contracts. But I don't know what the world's going to look like in 10 years. They could all be streaming contracts. So there are a lot of people who love soccer, who love the content, who love the players, who are going to watch it. So to the extent we have, obviously, ESPN and Fox pay $75 million a year. Univision pays $15 million a year. I will tell you that I believe there's another entrant or player that's going to come into Major League Soccer and pay them a boatload of money for other rights, other visual rights, and that will happen down the road. I'm not sure when it will happen, but it will happen, and it will obviously increase the revenues as it relates to soccer. How much, it's just too soon to tell.
Okay, so thank you for that. We're going to switch gears from soccer a little bit because I don't want to do an only MLS and NBA podcast today. And my question would be, what is your sport of the future in America or globally? A sport maybe not soccer, because we know that's growing. We know the NBA is growing. Is there another sport maybe listeners have not heard of that is growing on, say, a national or an international level?
Well, what we've heard a lot about that people are still unaware of or just don't see it as much is obviously esports. So esports is an industry that continues to grow, not only but in viewers but in revenues as well. You're seeing large, very, very large company and individuals buying these esports teams. During the summer, Robert Kraft purchased one of the first 7 teams for the Overwatch League, and each team's franchise fee apparently cost a reported $20 million. So a few years ago, a lot of people wouldn't have heard of esports and wouldn't have heard of that kind of a major league type of gaming experience, and now it's on the precipice of really growing to more of an international sport. You have a lot of people with notoriety buying teams. So I really think esports is a incredible, not only an opportunity, but a very, very fast-growing sport. When you come then to the more traditional sports, I would still think, I'd like to name 3. Lacrosse is probably the biggest group participation sport in the country and growing. We have 2 now major league or major lacrosse leagues out there, and the NLL, the National Lacrosse League, and the Major League Lacrosse. So I think they're going to continue to grow because there's a lot of interest in lacrosse. It's a great, great game to watch, and a lot more people are coming into it and coming into the game. Another great participation sport that you're seeing a lot more that people may not have seen, but all of a sudden it gets on television is rugby. Rugby is an all-time participation sport for years, and now it has some growing presence not only in the United States but abroad, clearly in Australia and New Zealand, but now you're seeing it more in the U.S. And one of the things that I like to play a lot is ping pong, and they've been talking about a national ping pong league for a long, long time. Ping pong is seen as more of a social sport that people play, but there are a lot of expert players, not only in the United States and abroad, and who knows if we're going to get a ping pong league down the road. So I'd have to name those, kind of the newer sport, esports, but then lacrosse, rugby, and ping pong.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And I know esports is something that I've been reading up about a lot, and that is a world I didn't know much about, and it's certainly growing. And to see video games treated as big-time sports is cool and interesting, and I do think that is something that is definitely going to take off, not only now, but in the long run. And then to switch gears again, something that's big in the sporting world is gambling on sports. The Supreme Court's going to hear New Jersey's case for why they should be able to legalize sports betting. What do you think is going to happen with the Supreme Court's decision, and what do you think the role of sports gambling has on sports in itself? Like if this case goes south and then maybe they say they get rid of all sports betting, is that going to really negatively impact sports? And I know that was a lot there, so I'll let you take your time because I asked about 3 questions in one.
I think it's time for all of us to face the fact that gambling is part of sports, and that gambling, and as long as it's regulated, it should be part of sports. I look at the younger generation, millennials, and one of the reasons that drives them to watch football is fantasy. And the fantasy games now, you see players and you see points, and you see that now broadcast on television because that's what people want to hear. They want to see fantasy value. But as it relates to just regular gambling, I'm a believer, and I know others are, that if it's regulated, that gambling should exist in sports. A lot of people are concerned about the repercussions of it, but again, if it has the adequate regulation, I think it's now time. We're now in 2017, and it's been a part of sports for a while, and if it's legal and if it's regulated, I think that we have come now to the time where we should legalize it and regulate it, and gambling should exist. To the extent it does go south, I'm not sure if it's going to have a tremendously negative effect on, whether it be ratings or not. I would imagine ratings might fall a little bit, but people still love going to the games. Most NFL teams, get sold out for each game, and there are only 16 games in the year, so I still think the viewership might drop off somewhat, but as it relates to gambling, I'm not sure what the effect would be. I don't think it's going to be, though, that material.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you have Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, basically all for legalizing sports betting because they know it's happening. But then you have Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the NFL, the biggest sport in America, adamantly against it, even though a team is moving to Vegas. But then you have an NBA team trying to move to Vegas. An NHL team just moved there, the Golden Knights. So I think the sports betting thing should be legal, like you said, if we can just regulate it. And we won't take too much more of your time here today. So the last couple of questions are, for like a retail investor, are there ways to invest in sports that they might not know of? Or I guess that just how do you think a regular investor can somehow get in the world of sports, if not buying a franchise, because most people can't do that at all. So how does a regular person invest in the sports world?
So a retail investor could get involved in sports in 2 different ways. To the extent that you don't have an ultra-high net worth individual, and let's say they want to get involved in a minor league sport like minor league baseball, those valuations have gone up tremendously, and you could go to business brokers. My friends at Inner Circle Sports in New York would be happy to entertain anyone who is seriously interested in buying a minor league sports franchise or European soccer franchise or anything like that with regard to, it may not be, kind of in the mainstream, but there are a lot of other minor leagues that have obviously markets and valuations that some people could explore and look at. If you're not looking to buy a sports team, the other way you get involved as a retail investor in sports is potentially purchasing stock of a company that supports or supplies the sports industry. I mean, you could look at Foot Locker. Recently Foot Locker showed better than expected earnings because they're focusing their sale on premium shoes. They're cutting shoes with lower margins to keep up with e-commerce. So someone could say, look, I think Foot Locker is doing the right thing, and this is how they're really supporting the sport sports world, and that's how you get involved in the world of sports. So you could do that as well. You could look at those companies that support sports or that rely on sports, and you could buy shares of stock in those publicly traded companies. So that was really one of two ways that retail investors could get involved in the world of sports.
All right, Michael, I really thank you for coming on today. It was a pleasure to talk with you. You know so much ins and outs of the big-time sports world that a lot of our listeners will really enjoy. So thank you again for coming on. It was great to talk to you.
And I thank you, Ben.
So I want to thank Michael Breit again for coming on Full Court Finance today. It was a really fun conversation, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you want to know any more about what Michael does and what EisnerAmper do, you can go to their website, which is just EisnerAmper.com. And that does it for another episode of Full Court Finance. Until next time, I'm your host, Ben Rains. And remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email over at podcast@zacks.com.